Gopi Jana Balaba Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Brajajanandana Yashodanandana Brajajanandana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Brajajanandana Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Giri Giri Radha Giri Giri Shri Radha Jaya Jagana Jaya Jagana Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Gorani Thai, Gorani Thai, Gorani Thai, Jaya Gorani Thai. Hare Giri Giri Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, Jaya Giri Govardhan. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Astapada Sakashri Shila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Astapada Sakashri Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Prantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Vrinda. We continue reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. He ended his lecture and asked for questions. A young woman raised her hand. You say that people foolishly worship the photograph of someone who has already gone. You gave the example of George Washington or Gandhi. But can't the photo of a spiritual teacher be very helpful to teach others to love him? It's a quotation from Srila Prabhupada. Yes, those who are spiritually advanced, they are not different from their photograph. Just like here is the statue of Krishna, he is not different from Krishna. The original person Krishna and this statue of Krishna are the same. Just like we are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna and the name of Krishna are non-different. Do you realize it? If we are not getting some spiritual enlightenment by chanting Hare Krishna, then do you think we are simply wasting our time? No, we are not wasting our time. We are actually getting spiritual ecstasy because there is no difference. Similarly, a spiritually perfect person and his photograph is the same because it is in the absolute stage. Is that clear? Govinda Dasi raised her hand. You said that after leaving this body, a person in Krishna consciousness goes to a higher planet? Srila Prabhupada. No. If you make perfection of Krishna consciousness, then after leaving this body, you will go directly to Krishna. But if you are not perfect, if you have simply executed a certain percentage only, then you'll get the chance of another human body. But one who has understood what is Krishna, how Krishna takes his birth, how Krishna acts, he doesn't get any more material birth. Then, where does he go? Tyaktva puna janma naiti mameti. He comes to me. That means in the spiritual, in the supreme abode of Krishna. Therefore, we should be very serious. Why should we wait for another birth, either in a very pious family or rich family or another planet? This human body can give you the highest perfection, but we have to be very serious and try for that perfection. But we are not serious. We are not very serious. Actually, human civilization means that people should be very serious to have the perfection of this human body. That is perfect human civilization. That is missing at the present moment. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're continuing the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Chapter 29 talks between Narada and King Prachinabarhi. Text 84. Please forgive me, the blue pen wasn't working, so I had to use the red. I'm not sure if you can see it. And also, when I was growing up, I was taught it's very rude to write in red pen. So I was feeling very bad, actually, writing Bhagavatam verse in red pen. I'm sorry. Etan mukunda yashasa bhuvanam punanam Devar Shivarya Mukhanishritam Atma Shotam Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etan Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Devar Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shotam Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etan Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Devar Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shocham Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etam Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Devar Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shocham Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etam Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Deva Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shocham Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etam Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Deva Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shocham Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Nasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samasta Bandha Etam Mukunda Yashasa Bhuvanam Punanam Deva Shivaya Mukhanishritam Atma Shocham Yakirtyamanam Adhigachati Parameshyam Yasmin Bhave Brahmati Mukta Samattapanha. Word for word. Etat, this narration, Mukunda Yashasa, with the fame of Lord Krishna. Bhuvanam, this material world. Punanam, sanctifying. Devarishi, of the great sages. Varya, of the chief. Mukha, from the mouth. Nishritam, uttered. Atmashocham, purifying the heart. Ya, anyone who. Kirtyamanam, being chanted. Adigachati, goes back. Parameshyam, to the spiritual world. Na, never. Asmin, in this. Bhave, material world. Brahmati, wanders. Mukta, being liberated. Samasta, from all. Bandha, bondage. Translation of purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This narration, spoken by the great sage Narada, is full of the transcendental fame of the Supreme Personality of God. Consequently, this narration, when described, certainly sanctifies this material world. It purifies the heart of the living entity and helps him attain his spiritual identity. One who relates this transcendental narration will be liberated from all material bondage and will no longer have to wander within this material world. Purport. As indicated in verse 79, Narada Muni advised King Prachinavarhi to take to devotional service rather than waste time in performing ritualistic ceremonies and fruitive activities. The vivid descriptions of the subtle and gross bodies in this chapter are most scientific, and because they are given by the great sage Narada, they are authoritative. Because these narrations are full of the glory of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they constitute the most effective process for the purification of the mind. As Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirmed, Chaito Darpana Marjana, the more we talk of Krishna, think of Krishna, and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. This means we no longer have to accept a hallucinatory, gross and subtle body, but instead attain our spiritual identity. One who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from this ocean of omniscience. The word parameshya is very significant in this connection. Parameshya is also called Brahmaloka. It is the planet on which Lord Brahma lives. The inhabitants of Brahmaloka always discuss such narrations so that after the annihilation of the material world, they can be directly transferred to the spiritual world. One who is transferred to the spiritual world does not have to go up and down within this material world. Sometimes spiritual activities are also called parameshya. Om Jnana Tinirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master is kindly opening my eyes with the shining torchlight of knowledge. I have no respect for what they did unto him. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we're coming to the end of this section of Srimad Bhagavatam, in which we've heard Narada Muni instructing King Prachinavarhi. And ultimately, we're hearing about King Prachinavarhi's liberation. He's attained his spiritual position now. So from being someone who was absorbed in fruitive activities, He was pious, he was good, he was doing the right things, but he was not focused in his spiritual life. From that position to now attaining his spiritual identity, we have this whole wonderful transformation of King Prachinabharhi by the grace of Sri Narada Muni. And throughout the Bhagavatam, we see that Narada Muni is very, very good at this. Narada Muni approached so many personalities, and so many people have taken shelter of Narada Muni and attained to spiritual perfection. A very, very, very well-known ones. We have Dhruva Maharaj. That's that Dhruva Maharaj, just a small child, was so hurt by the insult given to him by his stepmother that he left home at 5 years old. He left home, went to the forest in search of Lord Narayan. And Narada Muni, in his transcendental way, Narada Muni came to Dhruva and said to him, "Now, Dhruva, don't be so disturbed. Yes? Every one of us have to suffer insult, praise. It's part of being in the world. So don't become so affected by the words given by your stepmother. Then you should go home." Narada Muni was just testing his determination. But when Dhruva showed Narada Muni that, no, I am very determined for this, I cannot give up this determination that I have to find the Supreme Lord, to gain a kingdom. Narada Muni, he thought, and he gave the proper instruction to Dhruva Maharaj, by which Dhruva Maharaj practiced devotional service very seriously and sincerely, and all of his material desires were purified. And as we know through this pastime in Srimad Bhagavatam, that Dhruva Maharaj attains his original spiritual identity by the grace of Narada Muni. By the grace of Narada Muni, also we hear in the Bhagavatam Prahlad Maharaj. Now, even when Prahlad Maharaj, face to face with the Supreme Lord Nrsingadev, what does he say? He says, "I cannot give up the service of Narada Muni. Please bless me with real devotion to Narada Muni." And Prahlad, he heard from Narada while he was simply in the womb, that when the demigods were trying to take Kayadu, take her away, so that when she gave birth, they would kill the child, Narada Muni, he took Kayadu to his own ashram and gave her shelter and spoke to her spiritual knowledge that she was unfortunately in too much distress to actually really take on. But because the child within the womb is conscious, and that child within the womb, Narada knew, was very special, Prahlad Maharaj. He heard and he took on everything that he heard within the womb. So therefore, when he was very tiny, he exhibited all the symptoms of pure devotion by the grace of Narada Muni. By the grace of Narada Muni, also we have this wonderful pastime in the Bhagavatam of the salvation of Daksha's sons. If we remember this one from the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now Daksha, he's a Prajapati, so his role in the universe is to create population. He's meant to have many, many, many children, and those children are meant to have more children, and they're meant to populate the world. So Daksha, he had 10,000 sons, and they became known as the Haryashvas. Now these sons, they were very qualified, described in the Bhagavatam. They were gentle, they were obedient, they had all good qualities. And Daksha, being a good father, sent them off to perform austerities so that they would become very upstanding, righteous, good materialists. He wasn't sending them away for spiritual realization. He was sending them away so that they could come back and perform their duties properly. Because, in that time, it was very understood that we need to perform austerities in life. We need to have a good foundation in life to be able to go forward and do our duties properly. So Daksha wanted his sons to do this. Now these 10,000 boys, they went off, it's described, they went westward, and they went off and they were performing austerities in this holy lake. And they would bathe in the lake. They were performing great austerities there for a long time. Very focused and absorbed, and very focused on executing the order of their father. And Narada Muni, he came by there. And he saw that these boys, these 10,000 highly qualified boys, were performing such great austerities. What for? Just to become grihastas, just to become fathers and to populate the universe. So Narada Muni, when he saw the quality of these boys, thought, no, this is going to be a waste of their time. Just as we had with King Prachinabarhi. He was a king, he was performing good deeds, but Narada Muni, no, that's not enough. Because that's not going to save you from the repeated cycle of birth and death. It's just keeping you here. It's not actually going to bring you ultimate happiness and satisfaction. Simply being a good, righteous materialist is not enough. So when Narada Muni saw these boys engaged in such severe austerities, saw their quality, he spoke to them in very succinct, it's described in the Bhagavatam. I'll read the verse, there's just 1-2 verses. But in a similar way in which he spoke to King Prachinabarhi in an allegory, he did the same thing with the Haryashvas. Now, we've gone through the allegory of King Puranjana in great detail. And now we had a further chapter where Narada is continuing to explain, because the king was finding it hard to grasp the concepts given by Narada Muni, because he's speaking in a story format. But when he speaks to the Haryashvas, now because these boys had been very purified by performing severe austerities, they could understand his meaning without anyone else's help. It's said there that by their natural intelligence, they were able to understand the meaning of Narada Muni. So I'll read this verse that Narada Muni speaks to these boys. Very interesting. So this is from the 5th chapter of the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. The great sage Narada said, "My dear Haryashvas, you have not seen the extremities of the earth. There is a kingdom where only one man lives, and there is a hole from which, having entered, no one emerges. A woman there who is extremely unchaste adorns herself with various attractive dresses, and the man who lives there is her husband. In that kingdom, there is a river flowing in both directions, a wonderful home made of 25 materials, a swan that vibrates various sounds, and an automatically revolving object made of sharp razors and thunderbolts. You have not seen all this, and therefore you are inexperienced boys without advanced knowledge. How then will you create progeny?" Now, if a great saintly person come and said that to us, would we be able to understand the meaning of this verse? Would we be able to understand the meaning of this allegory? These boys were. Narada Muni goes on, just one short verse. "Alas, your father is omniscient, but you do not know his actual order. Without knowing the actual purpose of your father, how will you create progeny?" So the Haryashvas, they were able to understand. It says here that they considered these words with their natural intelligence and understood the meaning of the words. So they were able to understand this very tricky kind of allegory that Narada Muni is giving. And each line, each part of this verse where Narada Muni presents something is meant to, it represents something else. So in the following like 10 verses or so, it goes through, and the Haryashvas, it describes their understanding of the verse. That in this verse, Narada Muni is referring to the material body, his false designation. He's referring to that there is one man there. He's referring to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just go through a few of them. This revolving object made of razors and thunderbolts, this is time. There is the unchaste woman. This is the mode of passion. So we go through so many, their understanding of this was so succinct. They were so intelligent, they could understand it all. And at the end of just considering this, they decided to give up materialistic life. So all they had to hear from Narada Muni was that. They gave up their materialistic life and they never returned to their father's home. They just left. And they attained to spiritual perfection, these 10,000 boys. So Daksha, upon hearing that his 10,000 sons have now gone and are not returning to create progeny as he had hoped, he was very sad and he was upset. But after his lamentation, then he created more sons. He had another 1,000 sons, and they became known as the Savalashvas. And Daksha, even though he had lost his sons like this, those 10,000 boys, he again sent his 1,000 sons off to do austerities, to become very strong and righteous and upstanding, so that they would be able to perform their material duties. And again, the same thing happened. Narada Muni came by, and Narada Muni said to those next batch of boys, those 1,000 sons, I know you're very, very affectionate to your brothers, and that you're of the same quality of your brothers. And again, he spoke only a few words to these boys, and they, again, were able to understand. And they rejected materialistic life completely. And they went off and followed the path of their brothers. This is when Narada Muni becomes cursed by Daksha. Now, Daksha, he was very angry upon losing the second set of sons. So he cursed Narada Muni. That because Daksha means very expert. Yes, very expert in materialistic activities, Daksha. And so Daksha gave a curse to Narada Muni that you will never be able to stay in one place. You will not have the comfort of a home. You will not, and for Narada Muni, this is okay. And Narada Muni, it's described, he could have counter-cursed, he could have said something back. He's much more powerful than Daksha. But because he was a saintly person, he tolerated that, and he took that. And Srila Prabhupada describes there, and we remember Prabhupada's comment on this, that he had also been cursed in a similar way by the parents of his disciples, and that Prabhupada was constantly traveling. Prabhupada didn't have a fixed residence, but he took that as a blessing. So the potency of Narada Muni was such that just by his influence, by a few words, he was able to liberate, not just liberate, but he was able to help these wonderful personalities attain to their spiritual identity, become completely absorbed and fixed in devotional service. At the end of this section about the Haryashvas and the Savalashvas, there's a wonderful verse about Narada Muni. So I share this one. This is text 22 from the 5th chapter of the 6th canto. The 7 musical notes, sa, r, ga, ma, pa, da, and mi, are used in musical instruments, but they originally come from the Samaveda. The great sage Narada vibrates sounds describing the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. By such transcendental vibrations, such as Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, he fixes his mind at the lotus feet of the Lord. Thus he directly perceives Rishikesh, the master of the senses. After delivering the Haryashvas, Narada Muni continued traveling throughout the planetary system, his mind always fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. If I could sing, I would sing this song, because there's this wonderful song that Prabhupada puts in the purport by Bhaktivinoda Thakur from Gitavali. Narada Muni Bhajai Veena. Unfortunately, singing is not one of my strengths, but we can, if you have time today, have a look at this song. There's a wonderful purport Prabhupada gives about this song. So I just want to read that. It's not very long. So we can meditate on the personality of Narada Muni as we're coming to the end of this chapter. The purport of this song is that Narada Muni, the great soul, plays a stringed instrument called a veena, vibrating the sound Radhika Raman, which is another name for Krishna. As soon as he strokes the strings, all the devotees begin responding, making a very beautiful vibration. Accompanied by the stringed instrument, the singing seems like a shower of nectar, and all the devotees dance in ecstasy to the fullest extent of their satisfaction. While dancing, they appear madly intoxicated with ecstasy, as if drinking the beverage called Madhuri Pura. Some of them cry, some of them dance, and some of them, although unable to dance publicly, dance within their heart. Lord Shiva embraces Narada Muni and begins talking in an ecstatic voice. And seeing Lord Shiva dancing with Narada, Lord Brahma also joins, saying, "All of you kindly chant Hari Bol, Hari Bol." The king of heaven, Indra, also gradually joins with great satisfaction and begins dancing and chanting Hari Bol, Hari Bol. In this way, by the influence of the transcendental vibration of the holy name of God, the whole universe becomes ecstatic. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, "When the universe becomes ecstatic, my desire is satisfied. I therefore pray unto the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami that this chanting of Hari Nam may go on nicely like this." Srila Prabhupada says further in this purport that the members of this disciplic succession, because he describes our disciplic succession as coming from Narada Muni. So the members of this disciplic succession, in other words, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, should follow in the footsteps of Narada Muni by chanting the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. They should go everywhere to deliver the fallen souls by vibrating the Hare Krishna mantra and the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita. That will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can spiritually advance if he actually follows the instructions of Narada Muni. If one pleases Narada Muni, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rishikesh, is also pleased. Yatha Prasada Bhagavad Prasada. The immediate spiritual master is the representative of Narada Muni. There is no difference between the instructions of Narada Muni and those of the present spiritual master. So just as we're hearing in today's purport, that the more we talk about Krishna, the more we preach for Krishna, the more we chant Krishna's names, then the more we purify the heart, and Krishna becomes pleased. In the same way, Prabhupada is speaking in this, that actually we are in the presence of greatness. We're coming in the line of greatness from Narada Muni. And simply because we come in that line, we have a responsibility. You know? We not only have the empowerment that is coming through, we also have the, I don't know, what is it called? We have like a spiritual heritage, yes, that we can follow along in the footsteps of Narada Muni. And Prabhupada says the members of the disciplic succession, in other words, the members of the Krishna consciousness movement, not just our guru is a member of the disciplic succession. Actually, we are as well. You know, we're all connected in this way. So, Srila Narada Muni ki jai. For myself, I find a lot of inspiration in going through the lives of devotees. That's something that yeah, really gives me a lot of inspiration in Krishna consciousness. So also, one final one for Narada Muni, although there are countless. Actually, one point is that Narada Muni, he approaches everyone. So in these few examples I've mentioned, he's approached very elevated souls, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, the Haryashvas, the Savalashvas. But we also see that Narada Muni approaches Magari the hunter as someone who is of such poor character, bad activities, and we couldn't really think of much worse than the person of Magari the hunter. And yet Narada Muni's compassion, it's not only for those who are already purified, already performing austerities, already on the path. Yes, he can take them and push them forward, but he can also raise up a very, very fallen personality such as Magari the hunter. So that can also give us, wherever we may be on that spectrum of extremely fallen, or perhaps we've come from quite a pious background and we have a little bit of background knowledge, wherever we are on this spectrum, we can advance in Krishna consciousness under the shelter and the direction of our spiritual master, whom Prabhupada says there is a direct representative of Narada Muni. So compassion is not restricted to any one type of person, any place, any time. And we see this in Srila Prabhupada, that he gave compassion to everyone, yes? That he didn't just go like all the other swamis who had been to America. He didn't just go to the upper class and sit there in their nice homes and drink tea and discuss high philosophy. That Srila Prabhupada, as we're hearing in the Lilamrita, you know, he's right there. He's right there in the depths of hippiedom, you know, of people taking drugs, people who have absolutely no pious background, and yet Srila Prabhupada lived with them, held their hand and brought them up and gave them the realization of their actual spiritual identity, their spiritual nature, which is what is being talked about in the purport today as well. So one other very, very famous section in the Bhagavatam, when we hear a lot about Narada Muni and how his influence is so pure, is right in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Srila Vyasadeva himself is feeling despondent and unsure of what to do. So, as we may remember, in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have this introduction to Srila Vyasadeva. Now, Srila Vyasadeva, what an exemplary personality! And yet, he had just divided the Vedas into the 4 divisions. He had compiled the Mahabharata. He had done so many things. And he was fixed in austerity, in penances, in devotion. There was absolutely nothing lacking, so to speak, in Vyasadeva. And yet, because he is a self-reflective devotee, he starts being introspective and he sees that actually I'm not satisfied. What is the cause of my dissatisfaction? And this is also a very important thing to note. You know, he was such a highly qualified person. He had done so much service, so many things, and yet he still had this lingering dissatisfaction. And because he's self-reflective and introspective, he had an inkling. Perhaps this is because I have not properly glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So as we're hearing in today's purport, that glorification of the Supreme Lord is the supremely purifying activity, something that gives Krishna so much pleasure, therefore we feel pleasure. But Srila Vyasadeva is feeling despondent, and he wants to know why. So Srila Vyasadeva, he himself is reflecting upon this, and then Narada Muni comes. Narada Muni, his spiritual master, arrives. And Srila Vyasadeva, actually, as soon as Narada Muni arrives, he says very succinctly, yes, to Srila Vyasadeva, he says to him, "Are you satisfied by accepting the mind and body as objects of self-realization?" Straight away, boom. And just as we've gone through this pastime with King Prachinabarahi, fruitive activities and pious deeds, it's not enough. So with Srila Vyasadeva, he had compiled so much Vedic literature, and yet he hadn't given the right amount of emphasis to the devotional service of the Lord and glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So straight away, Narada Muni is able to distinguish what is the problem, and Narada Muni says that straight to him. Are you satisfied by identifying with the body or mind as objects of self-realization? And when I was going over this again, I was thinking, because of the character of Srila Vyasadeva, Narada Muni was able to say that straight away. Yes? Wouldn't that be nice if we were able to present ourselves to our spiritual master and straight away can say, but oftentimes maybe we're not humble enough to actually take that forceful correction from the spiritual master. But Srila Vyasadeva, he definitely was. And Srila Vyasadeva, in all humility, he says to Narada Muni, I ask you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. He says to him, like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere within the three worlds, and like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive supersoul. Therefore, please find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence under disciplinary regulations and vows. And Narada Muni, he says to him, you have not actually broadcast the spotless glories of the Supreme Personality of God. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. Such strong words, worthless. And he explains to him that because he has not specifically described the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is why he is feeling despondent. And this is why we receive the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Narada Muni, he is churning, as we see in Krishna's pastimes. Narada Muni, he'll show up and he'll churn things, to speed up the Lord's pastimes. Narada Muni is always there behind the scenes. And so we see that in this pastime here as well with Srila Vyasadeva, that not only had he compiled and divided the Vedas and given the Mahabharata, but this churning needed to go on, whereby the distinct glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead were given very clearly, and this is the Srimad Bhagavatam. Narada Muni, he says to Srila Vyasadeva, your vision is completely perfect. So now we have the benediction, the blessing of the spiritual master, and the recognition of Srila Vyasadeva's quality. He says to him, your fame is spotless, you are firm in vow and situated in truthfulness, and thus you can think of the pastimes of the Lord in chant for the liberation of the people in general from material bondage. So this is when we receive the Srimad Bhagavatam. I wanted to read a short part here because it connects with today and that glorification of the Lord. That glorification of the Lord must go on to purify our heart, to please Krishna, and to bring real satisfaction to the self. So in this purport to this verse, which is in the 5th chapter of the first canto, Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about how people have a tendency, we want to hear stories of people and of events, and so there's lots of mundane literature. So Srila Prabhupada speaks in that way. And then he describes that the living entities, they become more and more entangled in materialistic life by taking shelter and hearing these accounts of materialistic life. You know, we become more and more absorbed, more and more trapped. So Narada Rishi, being the best among all the Vaishnavas, is compassionate towards such unfortunate victims of worthless literature, and thus he advises Sri Vyasadeva to compose transcendental literature, which is not only attractive, but can actually bring liberation from all kinds of bondage. And Prabhupada describes that there's so much literature in the world, but people aren't getting satisfaction from that literature because there is a lack of spiritual knowledge in those literatures. Bhagavad Gita is the spoken message of the Lord himself, recorded by Vyasadeva, and the Srimad Bhagavatam is the transcendental narration of the same activities of Lord Krishna, which alone can satisfy the hankering desires of the living being for eternal peace and liberation from all difficulties. And as we know, Srimad Bhagavatam itself is Krishna and is given so that we can meditate on Krishna and we can attain freedom from this material bondage and attraction and attachment to Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is the purest Vedic literature, the spotless Purana. So it's by Narada Muni's grace that we receive this Srimad Bhagavatam. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he also quotes Lord Chaitanya, this Chaito Dharpanamarta Mahadara Jaya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadujitna Anandam Purivardhanam Prastadam Sarvatmasapanam Sarvatmasnapanam Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. That it's by chanting, it's this Sri Krishna Sankirtan. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I really like the translation of these Shastika verses straight from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it says, let there be all victory for the chanting of the holy name of Lord Krishna, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. That chanting is the waxing moon that spreads the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. It is the life and soul of all education. The chanting of the holy name of Krishna expands the blissful ocean of transcendental life. It gives a cooling effect to everyone and enables one to taste full nectar at every step. As Prabhupada says today, that the more we talk of Krishna, the more we think of Krishna and preach for Krishna, the more we become purified. This means we no longer have to accept a hallucinatory, gross and subtle body, but attain our spiritual identity. So all of this knowledge given by Narada Muni in this section of Bhagavatam, it shows us that the gross and subtle body is a hallucination. I really like the use of this word, hallucinatory, gross and subtle body. As we've heard, this is a very scientific knowledge given by Srila Narada Muni. And when we are in knowledge, then we have a chance to go beyond identifying with that. And as Prabhupada says, attain our real spiritual identity. One who tries to understand this instructive spiritual knowledge is delivered from the ocean of neshama. And we can see that following the footsteps of Sri Narada Muni. We can see that those persons that Narada Muni comes in touch with, they are freed from the ocean of neshama. They attain their spiritual identity. And we are part of that line coming from Narada Muni. So by taking shelter of the knowledge given by Narada Muni, the knowledge and the guidance of our spiritual masters, then we have this waiting for us that we can also cross over the ocean of mesh. We can attain to our real spiritual identity. And that's what I wanted to share today from this section of the Bhagavatam. I'm sure there are many other points to go through, but we'll leave it there and ask if anyone would like to make a comment or a question. Mm. I myself haven't finished reading. Obviously, I need to study a lot more, but if we read in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, it describes many I haven't finished reading Brihad Bhagavatamrita, so I wouldn't feel confident to speak the pastime here, but there is that wonderful edition of Brihad Bhagavatamrita, traveling around, encountering so many different devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki